I thought Dad's retirement party was just another night of polite applause. Then my brother-in-law grabbed the mic, accusing me of flipping the beach house for profit. I stood frozen as a contractor in work boots marched in, demanding the owner sign a demolition contract for 8 o'clock tonight. That was when I realized they were not just trying to shame me. They were trying to steal my property while the whole room cheered. My name is Evelyn Murphy. But tonight, amidst the clinking of crystal and the hum of polite conversation, I was simply the other daughter, the one who flew in, the guest star in the long-running reality show of the Keller family. I stood near the mahogany bar at the edge of the ballroom, nursing a gin and tonic that had gone watery 20 minutes ago. The Crestmont Yacht and Country Club was exactly as I remembered it from my childhood. Though perhaps the paint was fresh and the dues were higher, it was the kind of place that smelled of old money and starch. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Georgia humid air hung heavy over the manicured lawn. But inside, the climate was controlled to a crisp 68 degrees. The room was a sea of white linen tablecloths and navy blazers. String lights draped from the exposed wooden beams of the ceiling, casting a warm, flattering glow that was designed to make everyone look 10 years younger and 3 tax brackets richer. It was a beautiful party. It was tasteful. It was everything my mother, Elaine, had spent 6 months planning. From my vantage point, I could see them working the room. My sister, Tessa, and her husband, Graham Pike. They moved through the crowd not like family members greeting friends, but like a political power couple in the final weeks of a tight campaign. Tessa looked radiant in a silk dress that likely cost more than my first car. She had that specific Keller smile, wide, engaging, but stopping just short of the eyes. She laughed at a joke made by one of Dad's old golf buddies, a sound that was light and musical and perfectly practiced. Beside her, Graham was the anchor. He was a corporate lawyer who wore his profession like a second skin. He had a way of guiding Tessa through the throng, his hand placed possessively on the small of her back, steering her toward the people who mattered. Every gesture between them was choreographed. A touch on the arm here, a synchronized nod there. They projected an image of absolute marital and social solidity. If you did not look closely, you would think they were the happiest couple in the room. "They are operating at peak efficiency," a voice said beside me. I turned to see Evan Shaw placing his empty glass on the bar. Evan was my companion for the weekend. Though my family struggled to categorize him, he was not a fiancé, so he did not warrant excitement. He was not a project, so he did not warrant pity. He was simply there, a handsome, sharp-featured man in a charcoal suit who happened to be one of the most brilliant macroeconomic minds I knew. "Efficiency is one word for it," I replied, keeping my voice low. "I was thinking they look like they are selling something." Evan adjusted his cuffs, his eyes tracking Graham across the room. "Everyone is selling something. Evelyn, in this room, they are selling the concept of legacy. Your father is the product. Tessa and Graham are the marketing team, and the currency is validation." I took a sip of my diluted drink. Evan was right. Of course. He viewed human interaction through the lens of incentives and deficits. It was why I liked him. He was the only person who looked at my family and saw the math, rather than the melodrama. "And what am I asked, "in this economic model?" Evan looked at me, his expression softening just enough to show he was on my side. "You are the external auditor. You see the books are cooked, but you have no jurisdiction to intervene." That hit closer to home than he realized. I turned my gaze back to the center of the room. My father, Dr. Raymond Keller, was holding court near the head table. At 70, he still looked like the renowned heart surgeon. He was silver hair swept back, posture rigid, a glass of scotch held with steady hands. He was laughing, basking in the adoration of colleagues who were telling him how much the hospital would miss him. They did not know, of course. They did not know about the tremors in his hands that had started 2 years ago. They did not know about the bad investments in Florida land that had quietly drained a third of his pension. They saw the legend. They did not see the man who was terrified of becoming irrelevant. I lived in Chicago. That was the extent of the biography my family shared with people. Evelyn is up north, Mom would say, waving her hand vaguely as if Chicago were a desolate outpost in the Arctic. She is doing her own thing. Her own thing. The phrase always made me smile bitterly. In Chicago. I was not just doing a thing. I was a co-founder of Blue Hollow Design Group. We were an architectural firm specializing in sustainable, high-efficiency urban regeneration. We had a staff of 40. We had just won a contract to retrofit a massive industrial complex in the West Loop into a carbon-neutral residential hub. My name was on deeds, on permits, on design awards. I managed millions of dollars in assets and navigated zoning wars that would make Graham's corporate litigation look like a debate club. But here, in this ballroom, none of that existed. I remembered the last time I had tried to explain it. It was Christmas, 2 years ago. I had brought home a portfolio, excited to show Dad a feature about our firm in an architectural digest. I had opened the magazine on the coffee table, pointing to a rendering of a vertical garden system we had patented. It collects rainwater and reduces cooling costs by 30%. I had said, proud. Mom had walked by with a tray of cookies, glanced at the magazine, and said, "That is nice, honey. Oh, did you hear that the Peterson boy got engaged? The one who became a dentist? You remember him?" Dad had not even looked up from his iPad. "Dentistry is a stable field," he had muttered. I had closed the magazine and put it back in my bag. I never brought it out again. To them, I was the daughter who had failed to launch in the ways that mattered. I was unmarried. I did not live down the street. I did not provide grandchildren. My career was treated as a hobby, something cute I did to pass the time until I found a husband who could take care of me. "Earth to Evelyn," Evan whispered. I blinked, snapping back to the present. The room was shifting. The ambient music had faded, and a spotlight was sweeping across the floor, settling on the small stage where a microphone stand waited. "It is time for the speeches," I said, feeling a familiar knot of tension in my stomach. "Brace yourself." "I am scientifically observing," Evan assured me. My mother took the stage first. Elaine Keller was a woman who believed that if you ignored an unpleasant reality long enough, it would cease to exist. She looked beautiful tonight, fragile and elegant. She thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about Dad's long hours, his dedication to his patients, the lives he had saved. It was a good speech, safe. Then, she handed the microphone to Dad. The applause was raucous. Dr. Keller was a pillar of this community. He stepped up to the mic, clearing his throat. He looked out at the crowd, his eyes glistening. He loved this. He loved the reverence. "Thank you," he said, his voice booming slightly before he adjusted his distance from the mic. "Thank you all. 40 years of medicine. It goes by in a blink." He told a few prepared anecdotes about surgery mishaps and golf handicaps. The room chuckled on cue. Then, his tone shifted to the sentimental. He looked toward the table where Tessa and Graham were sitting. "A man does not get to retirement without a strong support system," Dad said. "I want to thank my beautiful wife, Elaine, and of course, my daughter Tessa." Tessa beamed, squeezing Graham's hand. "Tessa," Dad continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You have been the glue holding this transition together. You organized this beautiful night. You are always there, right down the street, making sure your mother and I are taken care of. I do not know what we would do without you." The room applauded warmly. Tessa dabbed at her eye with a napkin, performing humility with expert precision. Dad waited for the applause to die down. Then he scanned the back of the room, squinting slightly against the spotlight until he found me standing by the bar. "And Evelyn," he said. I straightened my spine. "Thank you for flying in," he said. "It is good to see you." That was it. He turned back to the crowd and raised his glass. "To the next chapter." "To the next chapter." The room echoed. I stood there, the glass cold in my hand. "Thank you for flying in. Not thank you for the check you sent last month when the roof leaked. Not thank you for handling the insurance paperwork when Mom got confused. Just thank you for occupying a seat on a plane. It was a masterclass in erasure. In 2 sentences, he had defined our roles. Tessa was the essential, present, dutiful daughter. I was the visitor, the outlier. I felt Evan's hand brush against my elbow, a silent check-in. I could have been angry. A younger version of me would have been furious. I would have stormed out, or gone to the bathroom to cry, or downed 3 shots of tequila and made a scene. But I was 38 years old. I ran a company that navigated the brutal politics of Chicago construction. I knew how to hold my ground when the concrete was pouring and the inspectors were shouting. I did not feel anger. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. I looked at Tessa, who was now hugging Dad, the picture of filial devotion. I looked at Graham, who was clapping with a smug satisfaction, as if he had written Dad's speech himself. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was absent because I did not care. They had no idea who I had become, because they had never bothered to look. "Are you okay?" Evan asked softly. I finished my drink and set the glass down on the coaster with a deliberate click. "I am fine," I said. "I am just watching." And I was watching everything. I saw the way Graham's smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he looked at Dad. I saw the way Tessa checked her phone immediately after the hug. I saw the way Mom looked relieved that the speech was over, her eyes darting nervously toward the wine bottles. I decided then and there that I would not engage. I would not beg for scraps of affection. I would simply stand here, in my expensive dress, and witness the truth of this family. But the night was not over. "Excuse me," Tessa's voice rang out over the speakers. The crowd quieted down again. I frowned. This was not on the schedule. The speeches were supposed to be done. Tessa was standing at the microphone, Graham hovering right behind her like a shadow. She looked flushed, excited. "I am sorry to interrupt the drinking," she joked, and the crowd laughed obligingly. "But we have one more thing to say. Graham and I wanted to say a few special words." My stomach tightened. Beside me, Evan stiffened. "This is deviating from the pattern," he murmured. "I do not like it," I whispered back. Tessa stepped aside, and Graham took the microphone. He adjusted his tie, a predator preparing to strike. The affable son-in-law mask was still in place, but there was something else underneath it now, a sharpness, a hunger. I did not know it yet, but the polite part of the evening was over. The observation period was ending. I watched Graham's eyes scan the room until they locked onto me. It was a brief, dismissive glance, but it sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I folded my arms across my chest. "Go ahead, Graham," I thought. "Show us who you really are." The silence that fell over the ballroom was different from the respectful hush during my father's speech. This was the silence of anticipation. Graham stood center stage, the microphone gripped loosely in his right hand, his other hand tucked into his pocket in a pose of casual confidence. He looked like he was about to announce a scholarship fund or a second honeymoon for my parents. "Thank you, Tessa," Graham said, his voice smooth, practiced, projected perfectly to the back of the room where I stood. As Tessa said, "We wanted to make a special announcement tonight, a gift, really, a promise to Ray and Elaine." He paused, letting the benevolence soak in. The guests smiled. Leaning forward, everyone loved a generous son-in-law. "We all know what this family means to this community," Graham continued. "We know the sacrifices Ray made, and we know that in retirement, the most important thing is peace. It is stability. It is holding on to the places where our memories live." I felt a sudden, sharp prickle on the back of my neck. Beside me, Evan shifted his weight. "He is pivoting," Evan whispered, his voice barely audible. "Watch the hands." Graham's expression shifted. The easy smile vanished, replaced by a look of grave, reluctant concern. It was a masterful performance. He looked like a man forced to address a tragedy he desperately wanted to ignore. "But unfortunately," Graham said, and his voice dropped an octave, heavy with sorrow. "Not everyone shares that vision of stability. Sometimes, the modern world and the pursuit of quick profit invades the sanctity of the home." He turned, Slowly, deliberately, he turned his body until he was facing directly toward the bar. Directly toward me. The spotlight did not follow him, but the eyes of 150 guests did. "We found out this week," Graham said, his tone sharpening, "that the family beach house at Harlow Point is being prepared for a quick sale, a flip, as they call it in the industry." The room gasped. It was a soft, collective intake of breath, but in the acoustic perfection of the ballroom, it sounded like a thunderclap. "Harlow Point," Graham said, shaking his head. "Where Tessa took her first steps, where Ray taught us all to fish. It is the heart of this family, and we learned, to our absolute heartbreak, that Evelyn intends to gut it, renovate it, and sell it to the highest bidder before the summer is over." The air left my lungs. It was not just a lie. It was a lie constructed with such specific, malicious intent that it momentarily stunned me. I stood frozen, my hand still resting on the cool marble of the bar. Graham was not finished. He raised a hand as if to quell the murmurs that were starting to ripple through the tables. "We tried to speak to her," Graham said, looking at the floor, then back up at my parents. "We tried to handle this privately, but the contractors are already lined up. The schedule is set, the profit margins have been calculated, and apparently, the memories of a childhood are just overhead costs to be cut." He pointed at me, a direct, accusatory finger. "Evelyn," he said, his voice booming now, "I know you are doing well in Chicago. I know real estate is a cutthroat game up there, but this is your father's retirement. This is your mother's sanctuary. You are flipping their history for a check." All heads turned. I felt the weight of their judgment like a physical blow. These were people who had known me since I was a child, people who had critiqued my prom dresses and monitored my college applications. Now, they were looking at me as if I were a vulture circling a dying animal. Tessa stepped up to the microphone, her hand trembling as she touched Graham's arm. She leaned in, her voice breaking just enough to sound devastated without losing clarity. "We just want you to stop, Evie," she pleaded into the mic. "Please, Mom has been crying all week. I know you have changed. I know the money is important to you now. But please, don't do this to them." "Money makes people cold," Graham added. A solemn echo. The murmurs grew louder. I heard snippets of conversation from the tables nearest to me. "That is terrible. Can you imagine selling her own father's house? She always was the distant one." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm. My instinct was to shout, to scream that they were lying, that I had never listed the house, that I was the one who paid the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance fees that kept the roof from collapsing. But I looked at Graham's face. He was watching me with a predator's focus. He was waiting for the explosion. If I screamed, I was the hysterical, unstable daughter. If I stormed out, I was the guilty coward fleeing the scene. If I cried, I was admitting he was right. It was a trap, a perfectly designed social guillotine. "They are not just shaming you." Evan's voice cut through the noise in my head. It was cold, precise, grounding. He was leaning close to my ear, his back to the room, pretending to order a drink so no one would see him coaching me. "Listen to the phrasing. Contractors lined up. Schedule set. He is establishing a narrative of imminent action. He is not just character assassinating you, Evelyn. He is building a public justification for an intervention." "An intervention," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "He is legitimizing a takeover," Evan said. "If the crowd believes you are destroying the asset, they will support him taking control of it. He is crowdfunding moral authority." The clarity returned. The cold, hard logic of the situation washed away the humiliation. Graham was a corporate lawyer. He did not do drama for drama's sake. He did it to win cases. And right now, he was arguing the case of Pike Vise, Murphy in the court of public opinion. I took a breath. I picked up my clutch from the bar counter. "Don't lose your temper," Evan advised. "Ask for the evidence." I stepped away from the bar. The sound of my heels clicking on the parquet floor seemed impossibly loud. I did not walk quickly. I did not look down. I walked with the same measured pace I used when entering a boardroom full of hostile investors. The crowd parted. They pulled their chairs in, shrinking away from me as if greed were a contagious disease. I saw my mother, Elaine, sitting at the head table, her face buried in her hands. My father was staring at me, his expression a mix of confusion and betrayal. He believed them. Of course he believed them. Graham was the son he never had. I was just the girl who left. I stopped 10 feet from the stage. The distance felt like a canyon. Graham looked down at me from the elevated platform. He held the high ground, literally and metaphorically. He expected me to beg. He expected me to apologize. I did not take the microphone. I did not need it. I projected my voice, trained by years of shouting over drill hammers and excavators. "Graham," I said. The room went deathly silent. "You have said a lot of words just now," I said, my tone flat, unbothered. "You talked about profit. You talked about flipping. You talked about contractors." "I am stating facts, Evelyn," Graham replied, his voice dripping with condescension. "I know it is hard to hear them out loud." "Facts require proof," I said. I took one step closer. I saw Tessa flinch. She knew me better than Graham did. She knew that when I got quiet, I was dangerous. "You said I am selling the house," I continued. "You said I am flipping it on the market. You said I have signed contracts. We know what you are doing," Graham scoffed. "Then it should be easy to prove," I said. "If I am selling a property, there is a listing agreement. If I am flipping it, there are permits. If I am pushing our parents out, there is a transfer of title." I looked him dead in the eyes. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, letting the tension coil tight around the room. "So," I said, loud enough for the back tables to hear, "what paperwork are you basing this on? Show me the deed you are referencing." "Show me the listing." Graham's smile didn't falter, but his eyes tightened. He hadn't expected a procedural question. He had expected an emotional defense. He had prepared for a fight about feelings, about who loved mom and dad more. He was not prepared for a due diligence audit in the middle of a party. He laughed. It was a dismissive, incredulous sound, designed to make my question seem absurd. "Paperwork," Graham asked into the microphone, shaking his head at the crowd as if to say, "Can you believe her? This is exactly the problem. Evelyn, you look at a home and you see paperwork. You see deeds and titles." He leaned over the edge of the stage, looming over me. "We are family," Graham said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that echoed through the speakers. "Who in a family needs paperwork to know the truth? We don't need a contract to know when someone is betraying us." "That is a very convenient answer," I said, holding his gaze. "But in the real world, Graham, you cannot sell a house with feelings, and you cannot accuse someone of flipping a property unless you have seen the signature on the sales order." "The signature is irrelevant when the intent is clear," Graham snapped, losing his cool for a fraction of a second before recovering. "The point is that you have abandoned the values of this family, and tonight we are drawing a line. We are not going to let you liquidate Ray's legacy for your balance sheet." "Who is we?" I asked. "The people who actually care," Tessa interjected, stepping forward. Her tears were gone, replaced by a hard, brittle anger. "The people who stayed. Evelyn." The crowd murmured their agreement. I was losing them again. Graham's emotional appeal was stronger than my logical one. To them, my request for paperwork just proved I was cold and calculating. But I had what I wanted. He had admitted, in front of 100 witnesses, that he had no paperwork. He had admitted that his accusations were based on family feeling and not legal documentation. "So you have nothing," I said. "You have a story, you have a microphone, but you have no proof." "I don't need—" Graham started. "You do?" I cut him off. "If you are going to accuse me of financial misconduct in front of my father's colleagues, you need more than a vibe. Graham." I saw my father stand up at the head table. He looked frail, his face ashen. "Enough," Dad said, his voice trembling. Evelyn, please, don't ruin this night any further. If Graham says you are selling it, I believe him. He handles the estate. He knows. The words felt like a physical slap. He handles the estate. I looked at my father. He handles your estate, Dad. He does not handle mine. Graham smirked. He thought he had won. He had the patriarch's blessing. He had the crowd's sympathy. He had successfully painted me as the villain. Go back to Chicago, Evelyn, Graham said, dismissively. We will clean up the mess you made here. He raised the microphone to his lips to make a toast, to seal his victory and dismiss me from the stage of relevance. But he never got to say the word cheers, because at that exact moment, the double doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open. The sound was violent, jarring, completely out of sync with the delicate atmosphere Graham had cultivated. The heavy oak doors bounced off the stoppers. Every head in the room turned. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he had walked out of a different universe. He was wearing heavy, steel-toed work boots that were caked with dried mud. He wore faded Carhartt pants and a high-visibility neon yellow vest over a stained hoodie. He held a battered clipboard in one hand and a smartphone in the other. He looked angry. He looked impatient. And he definitely did not have a membership to the Crestmont Yacht and Country Club. A waiter tried to intercept him. Sir, you cannot come in here. This is a private event. The man brushed the waiter aside with the casual strength of someone who moved drywall for a living. He scanned the room, his eyes squinting against the chandelier light, ignoring the appalled gasps of the guests in their evening gowns. He marched onto the parquet floor, the mud from his boots leaving distinct, dirty tracks on the polished wood. I don't care about your party, the man shouted, his voice rough and gravelly. I have got a crew waiting and a schedule to keep. He stopped in the middle of the room, looking around at the sea of confused faces. Which one of you is Evelyn Murphy? He bellowed. Graham froze on the stage. The smirk dropped from his face like a stone. I turned slowly to face the intruder. I did not know him, but I knew exactly what he represented. The paperwork had arrived. The chaos unleashed by the man in the dirty work boots was absolute. A murmur of outrage swept through the ballroom like a sudden draft, guests clutching their pearls and whispering behind manicured hands. The club manager was already rushing toward the intruder, flanked by 2 security guards, their faces flushed with the embarrassment of a breached perimeter. But while the room's attention was fixed on the spectacle of the shouting contractor, I turned my back on him. I had a window of perhaps 60 seconds before the social order reasserted itself, and I needed to use it. I moved toward my mother. Elaine Keller was standing near the edge of the stage, her hand pressed to her throat, her eyes wide and watery. She looked unmoored, a boat cut loose from its dock during a storm. Dad was still seated, staring blankly at the tablecloth. But Mom was vibrating with nervous energy. I took her elbow, not gently, but firmly enough to steer her away from the main cluster of guests and into the semi-privacy of a decorative alcove near the emergency exit. Mom, I said, keeping my voice low and level. Look at me. She blinked, focusing on my face with difficulty. Evelyn, I don't understand. Who is that man? Why is he yelling about demolition? Forget him for a second, I said. I need you to answer a question, and I need you to answer it with absolute precision. This is not the time for stories. You are scaring me, she whispered, pulling her arm back slightly. You have become so hard, Evie. I am the only thing standing between this family and a felony charge right now. So please, just answer me, I said. Where are the papers for the house at Harlow Point? Elaine looked confused. She smoothed the front of her gown, a nervous tic she had had for 20 years. The papers. What papers? The deed, I said. The title insurance, the original purchase agreement, the documents that prove who actually owns the land. Well, they are in the safety deposit box, she stammered. At the First National branch on Main Street, where they have always been. When was the last time you opened that box, Mom? She hesitated, her brow furrowing. I don't know. A while ago, maybe when your father renewed his life insurance. Or no, that was online. She looked up at me, defensive now. Why does it matter? We bought that house 30 years ago. It is our house. Everyone knows it is our house. Everyone knows, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the phrase. That is not a legal standing. Mom, everyone knowing does not hold up in court. Why are you talking about court? Her voice rose in pitch, bordering on hysteria. Graham said we just needed to fix it up. He said the market is hot, and if we sell now, we can secure your father's medical care for the next 20 years. He's trying to help us. Evelyn, unlike you. I stared at her. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. She truly believed it. In her mind, the beach house was still just a dusty asset sitting in their portfolio, waiting for a capable man like Graham to polish it up. She had completely blocked out the transaction from 4 years ago. The stress of Dad's first stroke, the mounting bills, the late-night panic attacks, where she cried about losing everything. She had rewritten all of that history to suit a more comfortable narrative. So you think you still own it? I said softly. You think the name on the deed is Raymond and Elaine Keller? Of course it is, she snapped. Who else would it be? Before I could answer, a shadow fell over us. Is everything all right here? It was Graham. He had descended from the stage, flanked by Tessa. They moved with the synchronized urgency of a crisis management team. Tessa reached out and took Mom's other arm, effectively tugging her away from me. Come on, Mom, Tessa cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. You don't need to be interrogated right now. This is all just a misunderstanding with the staffing agency. Graham is handling it. I am not interrogating her, I said, pivoting to face my brother-in-law. I am establishing the chain of custody. Graham straightened his tie. He was sweating. I could see the sheen of perspiration on his upper lip. Despite the aggressive air conditioning, the intruder had rattled him, but he was trying to regain his footing. He gave me a patronizing smile, the kind he probably used on opposing counsel during settlement talks. There is no chain of custody issue, Evelyn, Graham said. I apologize for the disruption. Obviously, there has been a scheduling error. I will go speak to that gentleman and clear it up. Why don't you go get a drink? You look tense. I am not tense, I said. I am curious. I took a step toward him, forcing him to hold his ground. You said on stage that you are flipping the house, I said. You said contractors are lined up. You said the schedule is set. That is right, Graham said, puffing out his chest slightly. I have been working on this for months. Someone had to step up and manage the asset. Managing an asset requires permits, I said. Harlow Point is in a coastal preservation zone. You need a demolition permit to touch anything structural. You need a zoning variance if you are expanding the footprint. You need a notice of commencement filed with the county clerk. Graham rolled his eyes. Always the technician, aren't you? Yes, Evelyn. Of course. It is all handled. It is handled, I asked. Yes, he said, impatience creeping into his voice. The permits were pulled 2 months ago. The board approved the plans last week. We are ready to break ground. That is why I was announcing it tonight. I wanted it to be a surprise. A surprise, I echoed. It certainly is that. I looked at Tessa. She was watching her husband with adoration, completely oblivious to the legal landmine he had just stepped on. She thought he was efficient. She thought he was taking care of business. I looked back at Graham. Here is the thing about permits. Graham, they are public record, and on the application, line 1, section A, it asks for the property owner of record. It requires a notarized signature from that owner to authorize the work. Graham's smile faltered, just a fraction, a tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth. I have power of attorney for Ray, he said quickly. I signed on his behalf. Did you? I asked. Because Mom just told me the deed is in the bank box and hasn't been touched in years, which means you didn't check the title before you filed the permits. I don't need to check the title on a house the family has owned since 1990. Graham scoffed. Don't play lawyer with me. Evelyn, I do this for a living. If you do this for a living, you are terrified right now, I said. I lowered my voice, making sure only he, Tessa, and Mom could hear me. Here. The ambient noise of the party, the nervous chatter, the clinking glass created a bubble of privacy around us. If you filed a permit application listing Raymond and Elaine Keller as the owners, I said, speaking slowly, enunciating every syllable, then you filed a false government document. It is a clerical detail, Graham dismissed, though his eyes were darting around the room now, looking for an exit. It is not a detail, I said. It is perjury, but that is the best case scenario. That is the scenario where you are just incompetent. I took a step closer, invading his personal space. I could smell his cologne sandalwood and expensive scotch. But there is a second scenario. Graham, the scenario where you actually did check the title. The scenario where you looked up the property tax records online, saw that the name on the deed was not Raymond Keller, and decided to file the paperwork anyway. Graham went perfectly still. If you put the wrong name on a permit application knowingly, I said, that is identity theft. That is fraud. That is a felony. You are crazy, Tessa hissed, stepping between us to defend her husband. Why are you trying to ruin this? He is doing this for Mom and Dad. Why are you so obsessed with paperwork? It is our house. Is it? I asked Tessa, not taking my eyes off Graham. Graham, I said, when you filled out that application, whose name did you sign? He didn't answer. He couldn't answer. If he said he signed Dad's name, he was admitting he ignored the actual title. If he said he signed my name or the name of the LLC that actually held the property, he was admitting he had impersonated the owner. The trap snapped shut. You didn't think anyone would check, I said. You thought you could bulldoze the house, flip the land, and pocket the cash before anyone realized the title had transferred. You were banking on the fact that Mom and Dad are old and trusting, and that I am far away in Chicago. I am banking on the fact that this is a family matter, Graham growled, his face reddening. And family doesn't sue family. You are right, I said. Family doesn't sue family. But the building department isn't family. The county clerk isn't family. And that contractor standing in the middle of the ballroom. I pointed toward the man in the work boots, who was currently shouting at the club manager and waving his clipboard in the air. He definitely isn't family, I said, and he looks like he wants to get paid. Graham looked over my shoulder at the contractor. I saw the calculation happening in his eyes. He was realizing that the theoretical problem he had created was now a physical reality standing on the parquet floor. I need to handle this, Graham muttered, pushing past me. Graham, Tessa called out, confused by his sudden retreat. I caught his arm as he passed. Just for a second. Be careful what you say to him, I whispered. Everything you say now is discoverable. He yanked his arm away and stormed toward the center of the room. I turned back to my mother. She was pale, her hands trembling. Evelyn, she whispered, what is happening? What did you mean about the deed? I mean, Mom, I said. That Graham has been lying to you, and in about 2 minutes, that man in the boots is going to prove it. I looked at Evan, who had been watching from a polite distance. He caught my eye and nodded. He had his phone out. He wasn't texting. He was recording. Let's go listen, I said to my mother. I guided her out of the alcove, back toward the light, back toward the center of the stage where the play was about to reach its second act. The beautiful party was over. The autopsy of the Keller family legacy had begun. The contractor, whose name I would soon learn was Cal Morrison, had grown tired of the manager's excuses. He saw Graham approaching the man in the expensive suit, the man who looked like he wrote the checks, and he turned his full, frustrated attention toward him. Finally, the contractor shouted. Are you the one who keeps emailing me at 2 a.m? The room went silent again. I stood next to my mother, holding her hand, not to comfort her, but to keep her upright for the blow that was coming. Watch, I told her softly. Just watch. The name hung in the air. Graham froze. He looked back at me, his eyes wide with a frantic warning. He was begging me with his gaze to stay silent, to play along, To save the family face. I stepped forward, leaving my mother's side. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, my movements deliberate and calm. "I am Evelyn Murphy," I said. Cal turned to me. He looked me up and down, skepticism written in the deep lines around his eyes. I did not look like someone who spent time on construction sites. I looked like a woman who drank champagne and worried about humidity. "You are Evelyn," he asked. "You are the one who has been emailing me since Tuesday." "I have not sent you any emails," I said clearly. Cal let out a short, frustrated huff. "Look, lady, I drove 40 minutes to get here because you or someone using your name said it was urgent. You said the buyer wanted the back of the house opened up before the inspection on Monday." He thrust his phone toward me. "Read it." I took the phone. My hand was steady, though my heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the screen. It was an email thread. The sender's name was displayed as Evelyn Murphy, Blue Hollow Projects. But when I tapped on the header to expand the details, the actual email address was a generic Gmail account, Evelyn Murphy, designs85gmail.com. My official company email was a secure corporate domain. I had never used a Gmail account for business in my life. I scrolled down. The text of the email was concise and commanding. "Cal, please proceed with the demolition of the rear sunroom and the removal of the structural beams in the master suite. We need this done fast. I will meet you at the Crestmont Club at 8 o'clock tonight to sign the final authorization and give you the deposit check. Do not delay. Evelyn." I looked up at Cal. "When is this work scheduled to start?" "Tomorrow morning," Cal said. 7 o'clock. My crew is loaded up. We are supposed to take down the screen porch and strip the siding off the south wall. A collective gasp went through the room. "Tomorrow?" my mother whispered behind me. But the summer house?" I handed the phone back to Cal. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying precision. This was not just a renovation. You do not strip structural beams for a renovation unless you are doing a gut rehab. And you do not rush a demolition crew to start at 7 o'clock on a Sunday morning unless you are trying to destroy something before anyone can stop you. "Mr. Morrison," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "I did not write that email. That is not my email address, and I did not authorize any demolition." Cal's face reddened. He looked from me to Graham, and the realization that he was in the middle of a domestic dispute began to dawn on him. But he was a businessman, and he had costs to cover. "Well, somebody authorized it," Cal said, waving his clipboard. "I have a signed contract right here, digital signature, IP address traced to this zip code, and I have a $10,000 deposit that cleared the bank yesterday." "Graham?" I said, turning to my brother-in-law. Graham was standing a few feet away, looking like a man who was watching his life burn down in real time. He tried to laugh, a hollow, nervous sound that fooled no one. "This is ridiculous," Graham said to the room at large. "Mr. Morrison is clearly confused. There are many Evelyn Murphys in the world. This is obviously a phishing scam or a prank." He stepped toward Cal, reaching for the clipboard. "Cal, let's go outside. I will write you a check for your time, and we can figure out who pranked you." Cal pulled the clipboard back, out of Graham's reach. "Don't touch my paperwork," Cal warned. His voice dropped to a low growl. "And don't tell me I am confused. I pulled the permits myself. I went to the county clerk's office on Tuesday." "It is a mistake," Graham insisted, his voice rising in panic. "This is the Keller family home. Dr. Raymond Keller is the patriarch here. If there is work being done, it is under his name." Cal looked at Graham with genuine pity. He flipped the page on his clipboard, revealing a document stamped with the official seal of the county records office. "Buddy," Cal said, and the informality of the word hit Graham harder than an insult. "I don't know what game you're playing, but the county doesn't care about patriarchs. They care about deeds." He turned the clipboard around so the room could see. "I pulled the tax assessment and the deed transfer history," Cal announced. "The property at 42 Shoreline Drive is not owned by Raymond Keller. It hasn't been owned by him for 4 years." The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator compressors behind the bar. The owner of record, Cal read from the sheet, is Harlow Point Holdings, LLC. He looked at me. And the sole managing member of that LLC, Cal finished, is Evelyn Murphy. The silence shattered. It wasn't a roar of noise, but a sudden, chaotic fracturing of the social order. People turned to each other, their whispers frantic and loud. She owns it. He said she was stealing it. 4 years. Graham looked as if he had been shot. The narrative he had spent the last hour constructing, the story of the greedy, distant daughter stealing the family home, had just been obliterated by a man in dirty boots holding a public record. He wasn't fighting a narrative anymore. He was fighting the truth. "That is a lie," Tessa screamed. My sister rushed forward, her face streaked with tears that were no longer for show. She grabbed Graham's arm, shaking him. "Tell him it is a lie. Graham, tell him Daddy owns the house." Graham couldn't speak. He looked at my father. Dad was sitting at the head table, gripping the edge of the tablecloth with white knuckles. He looked at me, then at Graham, and then at the contractor. The fog of trusting passivity was lifting, replaced by a horrifying clarity. "Evelyn," Dad asked, his voice weak, "is that true?" I ignored Graham. I ignored Tessa. I looked only at my father. "Yes, Dad," I said. "I bought the house 4 years ago, when you had the second surgery. When the insurance capped out and the hospital bills were starting to eat into your pension, I bought the asset, put the money into your trust fund, and leased it back to you for $1 a year so you wouldn't feel like you lost anything." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel like a burden," I said. "I didn't want you to know that I was the one paying for your recovery." Tessa gasped. You paid everything," I said. "The house, the taxes, the insurance, the new roof last year that Graham claimed he fixed. I paid the invoice." I turned back to Graham. He was trembling now. "So when you stand on that stage and tell these people that I am flipping the house for profit," I said, my voice cold and hard as steel, "you are lying. But when you tell this contractor to go tear down the structural beams of a house you do not own, that is not lying, Graham." I pointed at the clipboard in Cal's hand. "That is criminal trespass," I said. "And since you used a fake email to impersonate me and sign a contract in my name, it is also forgery." Cal looked at the clipboard, then at Graham. The contractor's face hardened. He realized he had almost been made an accessory to a crime. He realized his crew had almost destroyed a house without the owner's permission. "You told me you had power of attorney," Cal said to Graham, stepping closer. "You told me the owner was incapacitated." "He is," Graham stammered, pointing at my father. "Ray is—" "I am the owner," I interrupted, my voice sharp, "and I am standing right here, fully capable, and telling you that if one of your men touches a single shingle on that roof, I will sue your company into the ground." Cal held up his hands. "Whoa, lady. I am not the bad guy here. I was hired. I have a contract." "You have a fraudulent contract signed by a man committing identity theft," I said. "I suggest you look at the signature on that document again." Cal flipped back to the signature page. He squinted at it, then he looked at Graham. "It says Evelyn," Cal said, "but the IP address is local. And the contact number." Cal pulled out his phone and dialed the number listed on the contract. A phone began to ring. It rang loud and clear in the silence of the ballroom. It was a cheerful, generic marimba ringtone. It was coming from Graham's jacket pocket. Graham slapped his hand over his pocket, trying to mute it. But it was too late. The sound had already indicted him. He had not just impersonated me. He was so arrogant, so sure of his control, that he had used his own burner phone to do it. "That is my number," Cal said, holding up his screen. "I am calling the client right now." I looked at Graham. He looked small. The power suit, the expensive haircut, the country club membership, none of it could hide the fact that he was caught. "Answer it, Graham," I said softly. He didn't. He let it ring until it went to voicemail. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My mother was sobbing quietly into her napkin. Tessa was staring at her husband as if he were a stranger she had just met in a dark alley, and I stood there, the villain of the evening, watching the hero dissolve. "Mr. Morrison," I said, turning back to the contractor. "I apologize for your wasted time. I will reimburse you for the trip charge, but that demolition order is canceled. Effective immediately." Cal nodded slowly. He looked at Graham with disgust. "You are lucky she is stopping me," Cal said to him, "because if I had swung a hammer tomorrow, I would have had a lean on you so fast your head would spin." Cal tucked his phone into his pocket. "I am keeping the deposit," he grunted, "for the aggravation." He turned to leave, his boots crunching on the floor, but the damage was done. The beautiful party was dead. The retirement celebration had become a crime scene, and the evidence was ringing in Graham's pocket. I looked at the crowd. They were no longer judging me. They were terrified of me, or rather, they were terrified of the truth I had just exposed. "Now," I said, turning to my family, "I think it is time we talked about why Graham needs to sell my house so badly that he is willing to go to prison for it." The ringing of the phone in Graham's pocket had stopped, but the silence it left behind was deafening. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room, leaving the guests staring at the man they had toasted just an hour ago. Graham stood frozen, his hand still hovering over his jacket pocket, his eyes darting between me, the contractor, and his wife. I stepped into that silence. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The facts were doing the screaming for me. "Let us be very clear about what happened 4 years ago," I said, addressing the room but keeping my eyes locked on my mother, because memory seems to be a selective luxury in this family. I walked over to the nearest table, picked up a glass of water, and took a sip. It was a stalling tactic, a way to let the tension settle into something manageable. Then I turned back to Elaine. "Mom," I said, "do you remember the winter Dad had his second bypass surgery? The one where the insurance company denied the claim for the post-op rehabilitation facility?" Elaine looked up, her mascara smudged. She nodded slowly, a jerky, mechanical motion. "Yes, it was a terrible time. It was expensive," I corrected. "The facility required a $60,000 deposit up front. Dad's liquid savings were gone because of the market dip that year. You called me at 2 a.m. Mom, you were hysterical. You said you were going to have to take a second mortgage on the beach house, but the bank wouldn't approve it fast enough because Dad's income status had changed to retired." I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. The shame of that memory was surfacing, breaking through the denial she had built around it. "I told you not to worry," I continued. "I told you I would handle it, and I did, but I didn't just wire you money. Mom, you are too proud for charity. You wouldn't take a handout from your daughter. So we made a deal, a business deal." "No," Graham interrupted, finding his voice again. "This is revisionist history. You manipulated them into—" "Quiet," I said. The word was soft, but it snapped like a whip. "I am speaking to my mother." I took a step closer to Elaine. "We met at the law offices of Henderson and Clark on a Tuesday morning, February 12th. 4 years ago, I established Harlow Point Holdings, LLC, specifically for this transaction. I bought the beach house from you and Dad for its full appraised market value, plus 20%, to ensure your retirement fund was solvent. That money paid for Dad's rehab. It paid off the rest of the mortgage. It funded the trust that you are living on right now." Elaine covered her mouth with her hand. The pieces were clicking into place: the sterile office, the notary stamp, the enormous sense of relief she had felt when the check cleared, followed immediately by the crushing embarrassment that she had lost the family's crown jewel to her own child. "I remember signing the papers," Elaine whispered, her voice trembling. "But we agreed, didn't we agree it was just a formality, that nothing would change? We agreed that you would keep full usage rights for as long as you lived," I said gently. "I leased it back to you for $1 a year. I told you that as far as the world was concerned, it was still your house. I did that to protect your pride. Mom, I did that so you could stand at parties like this and not feel like you had lost everything. I looked around the room. The guests were transfixed. The narrative of the greedy daughter was dissolving, replaced by the image of a woman who had quietly bankrolled her parents' dignity. But legal ownership transferred that day, I said. The deed is in the name of my company, and that means only I can authorize a sale, and only I can authorize a demolition. Tessa let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tessa asked. "We are sisters. Evie, how could you keep something this huge from me for 4 years?" It was the classic Tessa question. It centered her feelings in a tragedy that had nothing to do with her. "I didn't tell you," I said, turning to my sister. "Because you never asked." "That is not fair," Tessa protested. "We talk all the time." "We talk about you," I said. "We talk about your kids. Your husband, your fundraisers. When was the last time you asked me about my finances? When was the last time you asked how I could afford to wire Mom $50,000 for the roof repairs last spring?" Tessa opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. "You didn't want to know," I said, my voice devoid of malice, just heavy with exhaustion. "You needed a version of me that fit your worldview. You needed Evelyn, the distant, selfish career woman, so you could be Tessa, the perfect, present daughter. If I had told you I was the one keeping the family afloat, it would have ruined your script." Tessa flinched, as if I had slapped her. "And you," I said, turning my gaze to Graham. "You knew?" Graham had been pacing in a small circle, like a caged animal. Now he stopped, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. He had regained some of his composure, the lawyer in him scrambling to find a defense. "Of course I knew about the LLC," Graham said, his voice smooth but strained. "I am the executor of the estate. I see the tax documents." "So you admit it," I said. "You admit you knew I owned the house." "I knew there was a corporate structure, yes," Graham said, waving his hand dismissively. "But that is a technicality. Evelyn, a tax shelter. It doesn't change the moral reality." He was pivoting. Evan had predicted it. When the facts fail, appeal to emotion. "Moral reality?" I asked. "Yes," Graham said, stepping back toward the microphone, trying to rally the crowd. "Even if you technically hold the deed, Evelyn, you have a moral obligation to this family. That house is Raymond's legacy. It is where your nieces and nephews spend their summers. You cannot just treat it like one of your development projects in Chicago. You cannot just decide to flip it because the market is high." I stared at him, stunned by the sheer audacity. "Graham," I said slowly, "are you listening to yourself?" "I am speaking for the family," he retorted. "We are saying you cannot sell it. 5 minutes ago," I said, pointing a finger at him, "you stood on that stage and accused me of flipping the house. You told everyone I was the one trying to sell it for a quick profit." Graham faltered. "And now," I continued, closing the distance between us, "you are arguing that I must be stopped from selling it. You are arguing for its preservation." I gestured to Cal Morrison, who was still standing there, watching the exchange with the grim fascination of a man witnessing a car wreck. "If you want to preserve the house, Graham," I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "why did you hire a demolition crew to start tearing it down at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning?" The contradiction hung in the air, thick and undeniable. Graham opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the contractor, then back at me. He was trapped in his own lie. He couldn't claim he was saving the house while simultaneously authorizing its destruction. "It was a renovation," Graham stammered. "A major renovation, to increase the value for the family. By removing the structural beams," Cal Morrison interrupted. We all turned to the contractor. Cal was looking at his clipboard again, shaking his head. "I don't know what kind of renovations you do in lawyer land," Cal said, his voice rough with disdain. "But in my business, when you strip the siding, remove the load-bearing beams, and demo the sunroom, You aren't renovating. You are prepping the lot for a teardown. Cal looked at me. The scope of work in that email wasn't for a remodel. Ms. Murphy, it was a clean slate job, the kind we do when a developer wants to scrape the lot and build 2 skinny condos where one big house used to be. A clean slate, I repeated. I looked at Graham. He was pale, his eyes glassy. You weren't renovating it for Mom and Dad, I said. And you weren't trying to stop me from flipping it. You were projecting. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. You were going to demolish the house, I said, piecing it together aloud. You were going to scrape the lot. And then what? You were going to sell the land. I was going to improve the asset, Graham shouted, his voice cracking. You don't understand the pressure. Evelyn, the maintenance, the taxes. I pay the taxes, I yelled back, losing my cool for the first time. I pay the maintenance. You don't pay a dime, Graham. Then why did I get an email from a buyer? Cal asked. The room went silent again. Excuse me? I asked, turning to Cal. The email chain, Cal said, tapping his phone screen. The one from Evelyn Murphy Designs. In the thread below the work order, there was a forwarded message from a developer in Atlanta, asking when the site would be clear for survey. Cal looked at me, then at Graham. Someone has a buyer lined up, Cal said, and that buyer wants a dirt lot, not a house. They are paying a premium for a shovel-ready site. I looked at the phone in Cal's hand. Then I looked at Graham. You weren't just flipping the house, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You were trying to erase it. You were going to bulldoze our childhood home, sell the land to a developer, and pocket the money before I could ever come down from Chicago to stop you. And how were you going to explain it? I asked, stepping closer to him. How were you going to explain to Mom and Dad that their house was gone? Graham didn't answer. He didn't have to. I knew the answer. You were going to blame me, I whispered. You were setting the stage tonight. You were painting me as the villain, the greedy flipper, so that when the house disappeared, you could shrug your shoulders and tell Mom, sorry, Evelyn sold it, Evelyn destroyed it. I tried to stop her, but she was too greedy. My mother let out a wail. It was a sound of pure heartbreak. She collapsed into a chair, Tessa rushing to hold her. You used my name, I said to Graham. You created a fake email account. You forged my signature. You hired a contractor to destroy property you don't own, and you did it all so you could steal the proceeds of a sale that I never authorized. I didn't steal anything, Graham hissed, his eyes wild. The deal isn't done. No money has changed hands except the deposit. Where did the deposit come from, Graham? I asked. Cal looked at his clipboard. Check number 402, drawn on the account of Keller Family Trust. The room gasped. You took $10,000 from my father's medical trust, I said, my voice icy. To pay a man to destroy his house, Graham looked at my father. Dr. Keller was sitting like a statue, his face gray. He was looking at Graham not with anger, but with the terrifying, empty look of a man watching his world collapse. It is not what it looks like, Graham pleaded, taking a step toward Dad. Ray, listen to me. I was going to put it back. Once the land sold, the profit would have been huge, millions. I was going to double the trust. I was doing it for you. Stop, I said. I turned to Cal. Mr. Morrison, I said, I need you to do something for me. Name it, Cal said. He was fully on my side now. I need you to forward that entire email chain to my real address, I said, including the headers, the timestamps, and the forwarded message from the developer. Done, Cal said. And I need to know, I added. Did you ever speak to this Evelyn on the phone? No, Cal said. Only email and text messages. From what number? I asked. Cal read the number again. It was the number of the phone in Graham's pocket. Thank you, I said. I turned back to Graham. He looked like a man standing on a trapdoor that had already opened. This isn't a family dispute anymore, Graham, I said. This is a felony investigation, and I suggest you start thinking about who your lawyer is going to be, because it certainly won't be you." I looked at Evan. He was already typing on his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked him quietly. "Drafting a preservation letter to the county clerk," Evan said without looking up. "And finding a forensic accountant. If he dipped into the trust for the deposit, Evelyn, we need to know what else he has taken." I nodded. Evan was right. This was just the tip of the iceberg. You don't burn down a house unless you are trying to hide something in the ashes. "Graham," I said, "I want to see the books." I did not cry. Crying is a biological response to grief or frustration, and I was currently feeling neither. What I felt was the cold, humming precision of a machine that had just been switched to its highest setting. I ushered Cal Morrison out of the ballroom, leaving the wreckage of the retirement party behind us. My parents were still sitting in stunned silence at the head table. Graham was likely frantically whispering to Tessa, trying to spin a new web of lies before the old one had even hit the floor. I did not care. I could not afford to care about their feelings right now. I had to secure the perimeter. "This way," I told Cal, guiding him toward the heavy double doors of the club's business lounge. The room was silent, smelling of lemon polish and laser printer toner. It was a sanctuary of dark wood and leather chairs, empty on a Saturday night. I pointed to a desk with a hardwired internet connection. "Sit," I said. "Please." Cal sat. He looked shaken. The bluster he had carried into the ballroom was gone, replaced by the nervous energy of a small business owner realizing he had almost stepped into a legal bear trap. "Look, Ms. Murphy," Cal said, putting his hands up. "I want to be clear. I run a clean operation. I don't get involved in family messes." "I know," I said, pulling up a chair opposite him. "And the best way to prove that is to give me everything, right now." I took out my phone and opened my voice recorder app. "I am recording this for my records. Do you consent?" "Yeah, sure," Cal said, wiping his palms on his work pants. "Great. First, forward every single email you received from the address purporting to be me," I instructed. "The initial inquiry, the scope of work, the negotiation on price, and the final authorization, everything." Cal pulled out his phone. His thick fingers tapped awkwardly on the screen. "Sending now. There are 12 emails in the chain." My phone pinged, once, twice, then a steady stream of notifications. I opened the first email. The timestamp was 3 weeks ago. It was sent at 2:15 in the morning on a Tuesday. I looked at Evan, who was standing by the door, keeping watch. "Graham is a night owl," Evan noted quietly. "Insomnia fueled by debt." I scanned the text. The writer Graham, posing as me, had adopted a tone that was professional but hurried. Subject: urgent demolition. Harlow Point. Body: "We are looking to clear the lot quickly. The structure is old and the maintenance costs are inefficient. I need a quote for a full teardown to the foundation." I felt a chill go through me. He hadn't just asked for a renovation. He had asked for a full teardown. He had been planning to erase the house completely. "Cal," I said, looking up. "Why the rush? Why did the email insist on starting tomorrow morning specifically?" Cal sighed, leaning back in the leather chair. "The client your impersonator said he had a buyer coming to walk the property on Monday afternoon. He said the buyer was a commercial developer who didn't want to deal with the liability of an old structure. He wanted to see a clean foundation and a soil report." "A clean foundation," I repeated. Evan walked over to the desk. "It is a classic developer play," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You buy the land, not the house. The house is just debris to them. If Graham presented the land as shovel-ready, he could command a premium price. He wasn't just selling the house, Evelyn, he was selling the permit and the demolition as a package deal." I looked at the forwarded chain again. There, buried in the middle of the thread, was the smoking gun. Graham had forwarded a query from a generic real estate investment email address. "Buyer requires site clearance confirmation by Monday or the offer rescinds." "He was on a deadline," I said. "That is why he was so desperate. The buyer was going to walk away if the house was still standing on Monday. I opened the attachment on the final email, the contract. It was a standard demolition agreement, and there, at the bottom, was the signature, Evelyn Murphy. It was a good forgery. He had likely traced it from an old birthday card or a legal document I had signed years ago, but it wasn't perfect. The loop on the Y was too tight, and the digital timestamp next to the signature showed it had been applied yesterday at 4:30 in the afternoon. I screenshotted the signature. I screenshotted the email header showing the fake Gmail address. I screenshotted the IP address metadata that was embedded in the bottom of the email chain, a feature of the quoting software Cal used. "This IP address?" Cal said, pointing to the screen. "I looked it up before I came here. It traces back to a residential node in Crestmont, likely a home Wi-Fi network." "Graham's house," I said. I turned to Cal. "Did he provide a copy of the demolition permit?" "Yeah," Cal said. "He sent a PDF of the approval." "Show me." Cal swiped to the attachment. I zoomed in. It was a standard county permit. Permit number, Demo 202489. Status approved. Applicant Evelyn Murphy. My stomach twisted. He had actually filed it. He had walked into a government office or logged into the portal and committed perjury. "I need to verify this," I said. I opened the browser on the Business Center computer. My fingers flew across the keys, navigating to the county's building department portal. It was Saturday night, so the office was closed, but the database was public. I typed in the address, 42 Shoreline Drive. The search wheel spun for a second. Then the results populated. There it was. Application type, total demolition. Status active. Owner listed Evelyn Murphy. Agent Graham Pike. He had listed himself as the agent. The audacity was breathtaking. He had used his actual name as the representative for the fake owner. I clicked on the Documents tab. There was a scanned copy of a notarized letter of authorization. I opened it. It was a letter, purportedly from me, granting Graham Pike full authority to act on behalf of Harlow Point Holdings, LLC, regarding the property. It had my signature. It had a notary stamp. I zoomed in on the notary stamp. Jennifer L. Davis. "I know her," Evan said, looking over my shoulder. "She is the paralegal at Graham's firm." "Of course she is," I said. "He made his own employee notarize a forged document. He has dragged her into this too." I took a picture of the screen with my phone. Then I printed the entire web page, the printer whirred to life, spitting out the physical proof of Graham's crime. "Cal," I said, handing him a business card from my purse. This was my real card. Heavy stock. Embossed. "I want you to go home. Do not delete anything. Do not talk to Graham. If he calls you, let it go to voicemail. I will have my lawyer contact you on Monday for a sworn affidavit." "You are going to prosecute?" Cal asked. "I am going to protect my assets," I said. "And you are going to help me, unless you want to be named as a co-conspirator." Cal stood up immediately. "I am on your team, Ms. Murphy, 100%. He left the room, clutching his clipboard like a shield. Once he was gone, the room felt very large and very cold. I looked at Evan. "He tried to erase me," I said softly. "He wasn't just selling the house. He was erasing my ownership. He was going to turn it into a dirt lot and pretend the house never existed." "It is a hostile takeover," Evan said. "Corporate raiding tactics applied to a family dynamic." He identified an under-monitored asset, fabricated authority, and attempted a liquidation. "I need to lock everything down," I said. I pulled my laptop out of my bag. I didn't trust my phone anymore. If Graham had been willing to forge my signature, who knew what else he had access to? He had been the executor of the family estate for a decade. He might have my social security number. He might have my old security questions. I logged into my primary business email. I changed the password to a random string of 20 characters. I enabled hardware key two-factor authentication. I did the same for my bank accounts, my personal email, and the LLC's registry account. Then I composed a message to my executive assistant in Chicago. Subject urgent. Security protocol. Body. Sarah, Effective immediately. Flag any communications purporting to be from me that do not originate from this specific secure domain. If anyone calls the office claiming to be a family member asking for documents or schedules, deny them and log the call. We are under a security threat. Do not release any information about the Harlow Point holdings to anyone. I hit send. My phone buzzed again on the desk. It was a text message. Sender Tessa. I looked at the preview. Evie, please, you have to understand. He is scaring me. He is saying his life is over. Can we just talk? Just us sisters. Please pick up. I stared at the words. Just us sisters. She wanted to appeal to the bond we shared. She wanted to cry together. To have me tell her it would be okay. To have me fix it like I fixed the roof. Like I fixed the medical bills. She wanted me to be the big sister who absorbed the pain so she could stay clean. I did not reply. I deleted the thread from my view, though I archived the message. Evidence. Another text came in. This one was from my father. Sender Dad. We are going back to the house. Graham is here. We need to settle this tonight. I typed my reply slowly, my thumbs hitting the glass screen with deliberate force. No, we are not settling anything tonight. Tonight is for documentation. I will come to the house tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Have Graham there. Have Mom there. Do not sign anything he gives you. If you sign anything, you are complicit. I sent it. I put the phone down. My hand was shaking, just a little. Not from sadness, from the adrenaline crash. You handled that well, Evan said. He pulled a chair over and sat next to me. Most people would be screaming right now. Screaming is inefficient, I said. Graham wants a screaming match. He wants an emotional brawl because he thinks he can win on sentiment. He thinks he can guilt Mom into siding with him. He thinks he can cry and make Dad feel sorry for him. I looked at the stack of papers on the desk, the printed permit, the screenshots, the email chain. He wants a family drama, I said. I am not giving him one. I picked up the permit document. I am giving him a forensic audit. I stood up. I felt lighter. Strangely, the burden of being the invisible daughter, the one who paid the bills in the dark, was gone. The lights were on now. The ledger was open. Let's go back to the hotel, I told Evan. I need to draft an agenda for tomorrow's meeting. An agenda? Evan asked, a faint smile playing on his lips. Yes, I said, walking toward the door. Item 1. The immediate resignation of Graham Pike as the executor of the Keller Family Trust. Item 2. The repayment of the $10,000 deposit. I paused at the door, looking back at the empty business lounge. Item 3, I whispered. The end of the lie. I walked out into the cool night air. The valet brought our car around. I could see the lights of the ballroom still glowing in the distance, but the party was over. The guests were gone. The music had stopped. I checked my watch. It was 11 o'clock. In 10 hours. I would walk into my parents' house, the house I owned, the house I had saved, and I would evict the parasite that had been feeding on them for years. I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the headrest. I didn't sleep. I just ran the numbers in my head, over and over, calculating the exact weight of the hammer I was about to drop. The morning sun sliced through the sheer curtains of my hotel suite, casting long, unforgiving shadows across the glass conference table I had asked the concierge to set up. I had chosen a suite at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Not out of vanity, but out of strategy. This was neutral ground. If we had met at my parents' house, I would have been the daughter returning to the nest, subject to the old hierarchy. Here, in a room paid for by my company card, I was the CEO hosting a meeting. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. My parents, Tessa, and Graham sat on the beige sectional sofa. They looked like refugees from a shipwreck. My mother, Elaine, was wearing sunglasses, likely hiding eyes swollen from a sleepless night. My father, Raymond, sat with his hands clasped between his knees, staring at the carpet pattern as if it contained the answer to a riddle he couldn't solve. Tessa looked pale, clutching a coffee cup she hadn't taken a sip from. And Graham. Graham looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. His suit was the same one from last night, but the tie was gone, the top button was undone, and the crisp confidence that usually defined him had wilted into a nervous slouch. I sat in the single armchair facing them, my back straight, a file folder resting on my lap. Evan stood by the window, silent and observant, acting as my witness and my sentinel. "Let's not waste time with pleasantries," I began. My voice was calm, pitched low to discourage interruption. "We are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss liability." I stood up and walked to the glass table. I opened the file folder. "Last night was embarrassing," I said. "But embarrassment is not a crime. What I discovered in the business center afterward, however, is—" I laid the first document on the table. It was a high-resolution printout of the email chain Cal Morrison had forwarded to me. "This," I said, pointing to the header, "is a record of electronic fraud. Graham, you created a Gmail account, Evelyn Murphy Designs 85, with the specific intent to impersonate me. You used this account to negotiate a contract, approve a scope of work, and solicit a vendor." I laid the second document down, the demolition permit application. "This," I continued, "is a government document filed with the county building department. It lists the applicant as Evelyn Murphy. It contains a sworn statement that the applicant is the property owner. Since I did not file this, and since I am the owner, this constitutes perjury. In this state, perjury on a public record is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison." I laid the third document down, the screenshot of the notary stamp. "And this," I said, my eyes locking onto Graham, "is perhaps the most damaging. You coerced your paralegal, Jennifer Davis, into notarizing a forged signature. That is conspiracy to commit fraud. You have dragged a 24-year-old employee into a scheme that could cost her her license and her freedom." The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. My mother let out a small, whimper-like sound. "Graham," I said, "do you dispute any of these documents?" Graham rubbed his face with both hands. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. He tried to summon a smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Evelyn, please," he said, his voice raspy. "You are using very heavy words. Fraud, perjury. These are legal terms for criminals. We are family. This was a misunderstanding. A shortcut. I was trying to get the project moving for Ray and Elaine. I knew you were busy in Chicago. I thought I was helping." "Helping," I repeated. "You were helping by ordering the destruction of the structural beams." "It was a renovation strategy," Graham insisted, though the conviction was gone. "I thought if we cleared the old structure, the land value would skyrocket. I was going to surprise everyone with the proceeds. It was a lapse in judgment regarding the paperwork. I admit that, but the intent was pure." "The intent was theft," I said. I leaned over the table, placing my hands flat on the glass. "But I am not a prosecutor today. Graham, I am a sister-in-law who is giving you a very narrow window to save yourself." I slid a single sheet of paper toward him. I had typed it up at 2:00 in the morning. "This is a list of immediate actions," I said. "Item 1. You will go to the county clerk's office on Monday morning at 8:00 when they open. You will formally withdraw the demolition permit application. You will cite administrative error as the reason." Graham looked at the paper, his jaw tightening. "Item 2, I continued. You will write a formal letter of apology to the county planning board, stating that you mistakenly filed paperwork for a property you were not authorized to represent. You will take full responsibility for the clerical error. You will blind copy me on that letter. And item 3, I said, you will send a cease and desist notice to Cal Morrison and any other contractor you have contacted regarding my property. You will explicitly state that you have no authority to contract work at 42 Shoreline Drive." Graham stared at the list. "If I send a letter to the county admitting I filed unauthorized paperwork, that is an admission of guilt. If the ethics board sees that, I could lose my bar license." "You should have thought about your license before you forged my signature," I said coldly. "You have 2 choices. Graham, you can report yourself for a clerical error, and hope they let you off with a slap on the wrist, or I can file a police report for identity theft and fraud this afternoon. If I file, the police will not call it a clerical error. They will call it a crime scene. Tessa stood up abruptly. Her coffee cup rattled in its saucer as she set it down. "You can't do this," she cried, tears spilling over. "Evelyn, think about what you are doing. He is my husband. He is the father of your nieces. If he loses his license, if he gets in trouble, how are we supposed to live? You are destroying this family over a house." She looked at our parents, pleading for backup. "Mom, tell her she is being cruel." My mother looked at me, her face crumpled with distress. "Evie, honey, maybe there is another way. We don't want the police involved. Think of the scandal." I looked at my mother, then at Tessa. The pattern was so entrenched. Protect the appearance, protect the man, sacrifice the truth to keep the peace. "I am not the one destroying the family. Tessa," I said, my voice steady. "I am the one preventing a crime from being completed in our name." I pointed at the paperwork on the table. "He stole $10,000 from Dad's medical trust to pay for a demolition I didn't authorize. He was going to bulldoze the house we grew up in. Do you really think he was going to stop there? Do you think a man who forges his sister-in-law's signature is a safe person to trust with your future?" "He made a mistake," Tessa screamed. "He was under pressure." "What pressure?" The question came from the corner of the room. It wasn't me. It was my father. We all turned. Dr. Raymond Keller had stood up. He looked frail, his cardigan hanging loosely on his shoulders, but his eyes were sharp. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking at Graham with the doting admiration of a mentor. He was looking at him with the clinical detachment of a surgeon spotting a tumor. "Ray," Graham said, his voice cracking, "it is just the market, the economy." Dad walked over to the table. He picked up the printout of the fake email. He read it, his lips moving slightly. Then he picked up the permit application. He looked at Graham. "You signed my daughter's name. You lied to the government. You took money from my account." "I was going to put it back," Graham whispered. "You acted behind my back," Dad said, his voice rising. "For months, you sat at my dinner table. You drank my wine. You let me praise you for being such a good steward, and all the while, you were plotting to erase my home." Dad shook his head, a look of profound disappointment crossing his face. "I trusted you, Graham. I trusted you more than I trusted my own judgment sometimes. I thought you were the son who stayed." He looked at me. "And I thought you were the one who didn't care." "I care, Dad," I said softly. "That is why I bought the house, to keep it safe." Dad nodded slowly. He looked back at Graham. "What else have you done?" "Nothing," Graham said too quickly. "Ray, I swear, it is just the house. I just needed a win, a big liquidity event." "Why did you need liquidity?" I asked. The room went quiet. The word hung there. Liquidity. It was a sterile word for a desperate need for cash. Graham looked down at his shoes. "The firm we had a bad quarter. My partner's there was a capital call. I needed to show assets." "A capital call doesn't make you commit a felony," I said. "A capital call is a business problem. Forgery is a desperation problem." "It is complicated," Graham snapped, his facade finally cracking completely. "You don't understand the pressure. Evelyn, you sit up there in Chicago with your design awards and your single life. You don't have a family to support. You don't have tuition. You don't have the lifestyle expectations that this family requires." "Stop blaming the family for your spending," I said. "It is not spending," Graham shouted. "It is." He stopped. He clamped his mouth shut, realizing he had almost said too much. His eyes darted to the side, looking for an escape route, but there was only the window and the door where Evan stood. I watched him. I saw the panic in his eyes. It was the look of a man who was drowning and had just realized the life raft was also leaking. "It is what, Graham?" I pressed. "It is just financial pressure," he muttered, sinking back onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. "Just a temporary gap. I just needed to bridge the gap. I looked at Evan. Evan was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. He had been silent for the entire meeting, letting me lead, but now he spoke. His voice was dry, academic, and devastating. Financial pressure that drives a corporate lawyer to commit basic forgery isn't usually a bad quarter, Evan said, and a capital call is usually $30,000 or $40,000. You were trying to liquidate a property worth $2 million. Evan walked slowly toward the table. You don't burn down a $2 million asset to pay a $40,000 bill, Evan said. You only take a risk that big if the hole you are in is even bigger. He looked down at Graham. People usually flip family assets in a panic for one of two reasons. Evan said, gambling debt or a lawsuit they are trying to settle before it goes public. Graham flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of the shoulders, but in the stillness of the room, it was a confession. Which is it, Graham? I asked. Graham didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. But Tessa was looking at him now, really looking at him. The denial was fading from her eyes, replaced by a dawning horror. Graham, Tessa whispered. What lawsuit? Graham didn't look at her. There is no lawsuit. Tess, don't listen to him. Then show us your phone, I said. What? Graham looked up. Unlock your phone, I said. Open your banking app. Show us the firm's accounts. If it is just a bad quarter, show us. Graham clutched his jacket pocket, the same pocket where the phone had rung last night. I don't have to show you anything, he spat. This is an ambush. It is not an ambush, I said. It is due diligence, and you are failing it. I turned to my father. Dad, I said. Graham has power of attorney over your accounts. He has access to the main trust, your retirement savings, and the liquid investment portfolio. Dad went pale. I want you to revoke that power of attorney immediately, I said. Right now, we need to call the bank and freeze everything. You are overreacting. Graham stood up, his face red. Ray, don't do this. If you freeze the accounts, it will trigger flags. It will look suspicious. Suspicious to whom? Evan asked. To the bank or to the people you owe money to? Graham glared at Evan, hatred radiating from him. Who is this guy? He isn't family. Get him out of here. He stays, I said. Because he is the only one here who can do the math fast enough to see how much you have stolen. I picked up my phone. I am calling the bank. Dad, I said. I need your verbal authorization. Don't, Graham lunged forward. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt to grab the phone from my hand. Evan moved faster than I expected. He stepped between us, not touching Graham, but blocking his path with a solid, imposing presence. Sit down, Evan said. His voice wasn't loud, but it had the finality of a closing door. Graham stopped. He looked at Evan, then at me, then at the terrified faces of my parents and sister. He realized he had just physically threatened me in front of witnesses. He slumped back onto the sofa, defeated. Go ahead, Graham whispered, his voice shaking. Call the bank. Whatever. I looked at him. The fight had gone out of him, but the fear remained, and that fear told me everything I needed to know. The $10,000 for the contractor was just the beginning. I dialed the number for the bank's private client services. I put it on speaker. This is Evelyn Murphy, I said when the representative answered. I am here with Dr. Raymond Keller. We need to place an immediate fraud alert on all accounts and revoke all third-party access rights, effective immediately. As the representative began asking security questions, I watched Graham. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at his hands, twisting his wedding ring round and round on his finger. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner. But I wasn't done. The bank was just the shield. I still needed the sword. I looked at Evan and nodded. It was time to find out exactly how deep the hole was. Tessa, I said, while the bank representative verified Dad's identity, I think you should check the mail at your house. Specifically, any letters from the State Bar Association or the Civil Court Circuit. Tessa looked at me, her eyes wide. Why? Because, I said, watching Graham flinch again, I don't think Graham is renovating the beach house for a profit. I think he is liquidating it to pay a settlement. A settlement for what? Tessa asked, her voice trembling. That, I said, is what we are going to find out. The silence in the hotel suite following the call to the bank was heavy. But it was not empty. It was filled with the invisible, frantic energy of a countdown. Graham sat on the sofa, his head in his hands, the posture of a man who had just heard the lock click on his cell door. My father, Dr. Keller, looked older than I had ever seen him, his hands trembling slightly as he held his own coffee cup. But I was not looking at them. I was looking at my laptop screen. You asked me what lawsuit, I said, my voice cutting through the quiet. And Graham said there wasn't one, I typed quickly, navigating the public portal of the Fulton County Superior Court. It was a search I had run hundreds of times for potential business partners. It was public record. It was brutal. Graham is right, I said, my eyes scanning the search results. There is no lawsuit pending. Graham looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. The lawsuit is already over, I corrected. There is a judgment. I turned the laptop around so the screen faced the sofa. The morning sun glared off the glass, but the bold black text of the court docket was unmistakable. Case number 23-CV490, I read aloud. Plaintiff Sterling Bridge Capital, Defendant Graham Pike, nature of action breach of contract and fiduciary default. I pointed to the bottom of the entry. Judgment entered against the defendant, I said. 3 months ago, the amount owed is $450,000, plus interest, Tessa gasped. It was a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a physical injury. 450,000, she whispered. She looked at her husband, Graham. What is Sterling Bridge Capital? Graham didn't answer. He was staring at the laptop screen as if it were a ghost. I can answer that, Evans said from his post by the window. Sterling Bridge is a private equity lender. They specialize in high-risk, short-term loans for professionals who can't get money from traditional banks. They are the people you go to when you are desperate, and their interest rates are predatory. You borrowed $500,000 from loan sharks, I asked Graham. It was an investment, Graham burst out. The dam finally breaking. I had a tip on a commercial zoning rezoning in Atlanta. It was a sure thing. I leveraged the loan to buy into the partnership. It was supposed to double in 6 months. And the rezoning failed, I guessed. The council voted it down, Graham said, his voice shrinking. The money had just evaporated. The land is worthless now, but Sterling Bridge doesn't care about the land. They have a personal guarantee, my signature. And they have a deadline, I said. I looked at the judgment date. They filed a lien against your personal assets 30 days ago. They are coming for your house, Graham. They are coming for your car. They are coming for your share of the firm. If they garnish my wages or seize my assets, the partners at the firm will find out, Graham said, his voice trembling with terror. I will be disbarred. I will lose my equity partner status. We will lose everything. Tessa, the house, the club membership, the school's everything. So you decided to sell mine, I said. It wasn't a question. It was the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place. You needed $450,000 fast, I said, walking through the logic step by step. You couldn't sell your own house because the bank holds the mortgage and your wife would notice. You couldn't sell Dad's house because he lives in it. But the beach house sits empty half the year. I looked at Cal Morrison's email chain again, the one with the buyer who wanted a clean foundation. The buyer, I said. The developer from Atlanta. Is he real? Graham nodded miserably. Yes, he offered $600,000 for the land. Cash. Closing in 7 days. $600,000, I repeated. Enough to pay off Sterling Bridge, replace the $10,000 you stole from Dad's trust, and still have a little left over to play the hero. But why destroy it? Tessa asked. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Why did you have to tear it down? Why couldn't you just ask us? Because he couldn't sell the house, Tessa, I said gently, the house takes time. The house requires inspections, disclosures, termite letters. A house sale takes 60 days. Graham didn't have 60 days. He had until Monday. I turned to Graham. The buyer wanted a shovel-ready lot. No demolition costs. No liability. No waiting. That is why you were pushing Cal to start at 7 in the morning. You needed the house gone before the buyer's surveyor arrived on Monday afternoon. And the drama, Evan added. The performance at the party. I nodded. This was the part that turned my stomach. The cruelty of it. You knew that if you just tore down the house, people would ask questions, I said to Graham. So you needed a cover story. You needed a villain. I walked over to where he sat. That is why you attacked me on stage, I said. You accused me of flipping the house, because that is exactly what you were doing. It is classic projection. You wanted everyone to believe I was the greedy, unstable daughter who was making rash decisions. You wanted to create so much chaos and resentment toward me that when the house suddenly, accidentally got demolished, everyone would assume it was my fault, or that I had ordered it and you were just too late to stop it. Graham didn't deny it. He couldn't. The logic was too tight. You were going to frame me, I whispered. You were going to let me take the fall for destroying Dad's memories, just so you could wash your hands of a debt you created. I thought you could handle it, Graham mumbled. You are tough, Evelyn. You are in Chicago. You don't come around much. I thought they would forgive you eventually, but if I lost my job, if I went bankrupt. You sacrificed my character to save your reputation, I said. I turned to Tessa. She was staring at her husband, horror dawning on her face. She looked like she was seeing a monster shedding its human skin. Tessa, I said, I know you didn't know about the debt, but you knew about the renovation, didn't you? Tessa nodded jerkily. He told me the foundation was cracking. He said we needed to do major structural work to save it. He said it would be a surprise for Mom and Dad, a new start. He lied to you too, I said. I pulled out my phone and opened the image of the fake email again. I zoomed in on the signature. Look at this, I said, holding the phone out to her. Tessa recoiled, but I held it steady. Look at the name, I said. Evelyn Murphy. Look at the text. Proceed with demolition immediately. Do not delay. He sent this, I said. He sat in your house, probably in your living room while you were watching TV, and he typed these words. He pretended to be me. He used my name to order a bulldozer. Tessa reached out and touched the screen. Her finger trembled over the fake signature. You used me, Tessa whispered to Graham. You made me get up on that stage and cry. You made me tell everyone that my sister was cold and greedy. You made me an accomplice. I did it for us, Graham pleaded. Reaching for her hand, Tessa yanked it away as if he were burning hot. Don't touch me, she hissed. You weren't doing it for us. You were doing it because you gambled our life away. My mother, Elaine, spoke up then. Her voice was weak, but it carried the weight of a sudden, crushing realization. We let this happen, she said. I looked at my mother. She had taken off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but she was looking at me clearly for the first time in years. We created this, Mom said, looking at Dad. We were so proud of him, the successful lawyer, the perfect son-in-law. We wanted to believe he could fix everything. We gave him the keys to the kingdom because we didn't want to bother looking at the books ourselves. She turned to me. And we ignored you, she said. We let him push you out. Every time you tried to talk about your work or your life, we let him talk over you. We let him paint you as the outsider because it was easier than admitting that our daughter didn't need us. But our son-in-law did. I needed you, I said softly. I just didn't need your money. Dad let out a long, ragged sigh. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline. I have been a fool, Dad said. I treated you like a guest in your own family, Evelyn, and I treated a thief like a king. He turned back to Graham. The look on his face was terrifyingly calm. You have 24 hours to vacate my house, Dad said. I don't care where you go, but you will not sleep under my roof tonight. Ray, please, Graham begged. I have nowhere to go. The accounts are frozen. I have no cash. That sounds like a liquidity problem, Dad said coldly. The room fell silent again. The emotional climax had passed, leaving behind the cold, hard reality of the mess we still had to clean up. The debt is still there, Evan reminded us. Sterling Bridge isn't going to go away just because we had a family breakthrough. They have a judgment. If Graham doesn't pay, they will seize assets. And since Graham has commingled funds, they might try to come after the family trust if they can prove he used it to secure the loan. Graham looked up, terrified. I might have listed the trust as a secondary guarantor. I forged Ray's signature on the loan application, too. My father closed his eyes. My mother let out a sob. Of course you did, I said. Because why stop at one felony when you can commit two? I walked back to the table and sat down. I closed the file folder. This is what is going to happen, I said. I am not going to let you drag my parents down with you, Graham, and I am not going to let you lose Tessa's house, because my nieces live there. Graham looked at me, confusion warring with hope. Are you going to help me? No, I said. I am going to mitigate the damage to my company and my family. You are just the debris I have to clear to do it. I looked at Tessa. She was broken, but she was listening. Tessa, I said, you need a divorce lawyer. Not tomorrow. Today. You need to separate your assets from his immediately before Sterling Bridge executes that judgment. I will pay for the lawyer. Tessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay. And Graham, I said, I have a proposition. It is the only lifeline you are going to get. Anything, Graham said. I will do anything. You are going to sign a confession, I said. A sworn affidavit detailing the forgery, the identity theft, and the misuse of the trust funds. You are going to give that to me. I will keep it in my safe. If I sign that, I go to jail, Graham said. If you don't sign it, I call the police right now, I said. If you sign it, I hold it. I won't release it to the authorities yet. What do you want? Graham asked. I want you to fix the mess with the county, I said. I want you to withdraw the permit. I want you to publicly clear my name with every single person who was at that party. You are going to send a letter to the entire guest list explaining that there was a misunderstanding and that Evelyn Murphy is the rightful owner and savior of the property. And the debt, Graham asked. The $450,000. I looked at Evan. We had discussed this briefly in the car. It was a risk, but it was a calculated one. I will buy the debt, I said. Graham stared at me. What? My company buys distressed debt all the time, I said. I will contact Sterling Bridge. I will negotiate a buyout of your judgment. I can probably get it for 60 cents on the dollar because they don't want the legal hassle of seizing a house with a wife and kids in it. Would you pay off my debt? Graham asked, stunned. I will become your creditor, I corrected. You won't owe Sterling Bridge anymore. You will owe me. I leaned forward, my eyes cold. And Graham, I am a much stricter lender than they are. You will pay me back every cent. We will garnish your future earnings. We will put a lien on your share of the firm. You will work for the next 10 years to pay me back, but you will do it as a free man, and your daughters won't have to visit you in prison. Why? Graham whispered. Why would you do that after what I did to you? Because, I said, standing up and looking at my parents and my sister. Because unlike you, I actually care about this family, and I don't want my nieces to read about their father's arrest in the morning paper. I picked up my purse. But make no mistake, Graham, one missed payment, one lie, one step out of line, and that affidavit goes to the district attorney. Do we have a deal? Graham looked at the table, then at his wife who wouldn't look at him, then at me. We have a deal, he whispered. Good, I said. Evan, call the lawyer. Let's draw up the papers. I walked to the window and looked out. The sun was fully up now. The secrets were out. The house was safe. But the family had just been demolished, and we were standing in the rubble. The verbal agreement we had reached in the hotel suite was fragile. It was a promise made by a desperate man in a room full of emotional wreckage, and in my business experience, desperation makes people dangerous, not honest. Graham had agreed to the deal I would buy his debt, and he would sign a confession, but until the ink was wet on the page, he was still a wild animal looking for a hole in the fence. I spent the next 3 hours building a fence that was 10 feet high and electrified. I did not go back to sleep. Instead, I hired James Thorne. James was a real estate litigation attorney in Atlanta, whom I had worked with on a previous zoning project. He was expensive, aggressive, and entirely unconnected to the social web of the Crestmont Country Club. He did not care about Graham's reputation or my parents' feelings. He cared about the statute of limitations and property rights. "I need a full lockdown," I told James over the phone as I paced the living room of my hotel suite. "By noon today, I want Graham Pike to be radioactive." "We can do that," James said, his voice crisp and professional. "I will draft a formal cease and desist order regarding the property at 42 Shoreline Drive. We will specify that he has no agency, no power of attorney, and no right to enter the premises. I will have it couriered to his home and his office within the hour." "Do it," I said. "And James, I need a notice of fraudulent impersonation filed with the county building department." "That is aggressive," James noted. "That flags the property, it stops the permit, but it also triggers an internal review by the county." "I don't care about the review," I said. "I care about the bulldozer. Graham filed a permit application under my name. I want the county to know that signature is a forgery before he tries to claim it was a clerical error." "Understood," James said. "I will file it electronically and follow up with a hard copy. If he tries to talk to a clerk, his name will flash red on their screen." I hung up and turned to Evan. He was sitting at the glass table, organizing the digital evidence we had collected the night before. "We need to close the loop with Cal Morrison," I said. "Graham is going to try to spin this with him. He will tell Cal I'm crazy, or that I changed my mind. I need Cal's testimony locked in before Graham gets to him." I called Cal. He answered on the second ring, sounding wary. "Ms. Murphy," Cal said. "I haven't heard from your brother-in-law, but my phone has been blowing up from a number I don't recognize." "That is probably his partner or his lawyer," I said. "Don't answer it. Cal, I am sending you a document via DocuSign right now. It is a sworn affidavit. It simply states the facts of our interaction, that you were contacted by someone claiming to be me, that you were instructed to demolish the structural beams, and that the deposit check came from the Keller Family Trust." "You want me to sign a legal statement?" Cal asked. "I told you, I don't want trouble." "Signing this prevents trouble," I assured him. "It proves you were acting in good faith based on fraudulent instructions. If you don't sign it, and the county investigates why you were about to tear down a house without the owner's permission, you look like an accomplice. If you sign it, you are a witness." There was a pause. Cal was a businessman. He understood leverage. "Send it," Cal said. "But I am keeping the $10,000. That is my kill fee." "Keep it," I said. "Consider it a bonus for honesty." I hung up. 2 doors closed. But I knew Graham. He was a man who lived on contingencies. If Plan A failed, he had Plan B. If he couldn't demolish the house to sell the land, he might try to damage it to claim the insurance. Or he might try to sell the contract to another developer before we could record the fraud. I sat down at my laptop and pulled up a list of every major demolition and excavation contractor in the county. There were only 5 big enough to handle a job like this on short notice. I drafted a generic email, attaching a copy of my deed. "To whom it may concern, please be advised that I, Evelyn Murphy, am the sole owner of the property at 42 Shoreline Drive. No other individual, specifically Mr. Graham Pike, has the authority to contract work on this site. Any contracts signed by him regarding this property are void and unauthorized. If you are approached, please contact me immediately." I hit send. It was a scorched earth tactic. I was effectively blacklisting my own brother-in-law in the local construction industry. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Tessa. Can we talk? Graham is freaking out. He received the letter from your lawyer. He says you are treating him like a criminal. I type back. He committed a crime. Tessa. We are meeting at the lawyer's office at 4 o'clock to sign the final agreement. Bring Mom and Dad. Please, Evie, she replied. Can't we just handle this at the house? A lawyer's office makes it so official. He is terrified. He says if this gets out, he is ruined. Can't we keep it in the family? I looked at the screen. The phrase, keep it in the family, was the exact mechanism that had allowed Graham to steal from us in the first place. It was the curtain he hid behind. I called her. Tessa, I said when she picked up. Her voice was thick with tears. Evie, please, she sobbed. He is my husband. He made a mistake. But if you file these papers, if you put this on the record, it stays there forever. That is the point, I said. Tessa, listen to me. This isn't a negotiation about paint colors. This is a hostage situation. He took Dad's trust hostage. He took my house hostage. And now I am negotiating the release. But he is family. If he is family, I said, my voice hardening, then why did he try to frame me? Why did he stand on that stage and tell everyone I was the villain? He didn't treat me like family. Tessa, he treated me like a scapegoat. You have a choice. You can come to the lawyer's office and help me secure our parents' future, or you can stay home and wait for the sheriff to serve the eviction notice when the bank seizes your house. There was silence on the line. Then a small, defeated voice. We will be there, Tessa said. The conference room at James Thorne's office was sterile and intimidating. It had a long table of polished granite and a view of the Atlanta skyline that looked like a jagged set of teeth. I sat at the head of the table. James sat to my right, a stack of documents in front of him. Evan sat to my left. Graham, Tessa, and my parents arrived 10 minutes late. They looked like a funeral procession. Graham was wearing a different suit, but he looked even worse than he had in the morning. His skin was gray, and his eyes were darting around the room, looking for a trap. They sat down. Graham didn't look at me. He looked at the documents. This is aggressive, Graham said, sliding the cease and desist letter across the table. You sent this to my office. My partners see my mail. Evelyn, you are trying to humiliate me. I am establishing a legal baseline, I said. Did you withdraw the permit? I went to the clerk, Graham muttered. I told them there was a scheduling conflict and we were putting the project on hold. That is not what I asked you to do, I said. I asked you to withdraw it based on administrative error regarding the applicant. I couldn't say that, Graham snapped. They would have flagged me. So you lied again, I said. I looked at James. James made a note on his legal pad. We will deal with the county, James said smoothly. My client has already filed a notice of interest that supersedes your application. The permit is dead. Mr. Pike, what we are here to discuss is the affidavit of confession and the debt assumption agreement. James slid a thick document toward Graham. This outlines the terms Ms. Murphy proposed, James explained. Ms. Murphy's holding company will purchase the judgment held by Sterling Bridge Capital. You will then owe the principal sum of $450,000 to her company. The repayment terms are set at 10 years, with an interest rate of 5%. The loan is secured by a second lien on your primary residence and a garnishment order on your partnership distributions. Graham read the paper. His hands were shaking. And this, Graham asked, pointing to the second document. That is the affidavit, James said. In it, you admit to forging Evelyn Murphy's signature, impersonating her via email, and misappropriating funds from the Keller Family Trust. This document will be held in escrow. It will not be filed with the authorities unless you default on a payment or violate the terms of the non-disparagement clause. Graham stared at the affidavit. This is a suicide note. If this ever gets out, I am done. I will be disbarred. I will go to jail. Then don't default, I said. Graham looked up at me. The fear in his eyes was replaced by a flash of the old arrogance, the cornered rat baring its teeth. You are enjoying this, he spat. You have been waiting for this for years. Haven't you? The little sister finally gets to hold the whip? I am not enjoying this, Graham, I said. I am cleaning up a mess you made. You are trying to control me, Graham said, his voice rising. You think because you have money you can own me. Well, I have leverage too. Evelyn. I raised an eyebrow. Do you? I know people, Graham said, leaning forward. I know the developers in this town. I know the zoning board. If you force me to sign this, I can make things very difficult for Blue Hollow. Rumors spread fast. I can tell everyone that your company is insolvent, that you are leveraging family assets because you are broke. I can ruin your reputation before you even break ground on your next project. The room went silent. Tessa looked at her husband with horror. Graham, stop, she whispered. No, Graham shouted. She wants to play hardball. Let's play. If she destroys me, I will drag her down with me. I will tell every client she has that she is a fraud who stole her father's house. He was threatening me. In a room with a lawyer and a witness, he was so desperate to regain control that he was digging the hole deeper. I didn't get angry. I felt a strange sense of calm. He had just given me the final key. Thank you, Graham, I said softly. For what? He sneered. For proving intent, I said. I looked at James. Did you get that? Verbatim, James said, tapping his pen on the pad. Threatening to defame a creditor to leverage a settlement. That is extortion. Mr. Pike, Graham froze, but the final blow didn't come from me. It came from the other end of the table. Enough, my father stood up. He walked slowly to the head of the table where I sat. He didn't look at me. He looked at Graham. Ray, Graham started, his voice wavering. I am just trying to negotiate. She is being unreasonable. She is saving your life, my father said. His voice was not loud, but it was trembling with a rage I had never heard before. You just threatened to lie about my daughter, Dad said. You threatened to destroy her business, after you stole from me, after you tried to destroy my home. Dad placed his hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, solid weight. For years, Dad said. I let you use my name. Dr. Keller approves this. Dr. Keller supports that. You wore my reputation like a suit of armor. He leaned over the table, looking Graham dead in the eye. Take it off, Dad said. What? Graham whispered. My name, Dad said. It is not yours anymore. The house is not yours. The trust is not yours. And if you ever use my name to legitimize one of your schemes again, if you ever use me as a shield to attack my daughter. Dad paused, his breathing shallow. I will personally walk this affidavit to the district attorney, Dad said, and I will testify against you. Graham slumped back in his chair. He looked at Tessa. She was looking at the table, refusing to meet his eyes. He looked at his lawyer, who was staring at the ceiling. He looked at me. He realized, finally, that the door was closed. There was no charm offensive that could fix this. There was no family understanding left to exploit. There is no way out, Graham, I said quietly. You either sign the papers and spend the next 10 years working for me, or you walk out that door and I call the police. Those are the options. Pick one. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the scratching of James Thorne's pen as he prepared the signature page. Graham picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he had to use his other hand to steady it. I will sign, he whispered. I know you will, I said. But before you do, I have one more condition. Graham looked up, defeated. What? The party, I said. Last night, you broke the story. Now you are going to fix it. The conference room in James Thorne's office was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of Graham's pen against the mahogany table. It was the sound of a bomb counting down. We had reached the endgame. The verbal agreements of the morning were being converted into binding legal reality, and the gravity of it was finally settling onto Graham's shoulders. My parents sat on the leather sofa against the wall, looking like ghosts of the people they had been 24 hours ago. Tessa sat next to them, staring at her hands. James Thorne, my attorney, slid the final stack of documents across the polished surface. "This is the irrevocable power of attorney revocation," James stated, his voice devoid of any warmth, "and the confession of judgment, and the debt assumption agreement." Graham looked at the papers. He didn't pick up the pen to sign. Instead, he looked up at me, a frantic, desperate light kindling in his eyes. He wasn't done. He still thought he could maneuver. He still thought he could charm his way out of the trap he had built. "Evelyn," Graham said, his voice dropping to that confidential, lawyerly tone he used to close deals. "Look, I understand the paperwork. I get it. But before I sign this, let's look at the logistics." "There are no logistics, Graham," I said from the head of the table. "There is only a signature." "But think about it," Graham pressed, leaning forward. "You are in Chicago. You run a massive design firm. You don't have time to manage a property sale in Georgia. You don't have the contacts." He gestured to the window, toward the city skyline. "I have the buyer lined up, Evie, that developer from Atlanta. He is still ready to wire $600,000 on Monday. If you sign a limited representation agreement just for this one transaction, I can close the deal for you. We sell the land. I pay you back the $450,000 immediately, and the family keeps the surplus. It is cleaner. It is faster." I stared at him. It was almost impressive. Even with his head on the block, he was trying to sell me the axe. "You want me to authorize you to sell the land," I repeated. "The land you tried to steal." "I am trying to facilitate a solution," Graham insisted, looking at my father for support. "Ray, tell her. It makes sense. Why hold on to a debt for 10 years when we can wipe it clean in 48 hours? I am willing to do the work. I will handle the closing for free, for the family." My father didn't speak. He just watched Graham with sad, tired eyes. "James," I said, not breaking eye contact with Graham, "please show him Exhibit C." James opened a folder and laid a single sheet of paper on the table. It was the ownership abstract for the shell company that the Atlanta developer used. "We ran a background check on your buyer," I said. Graham froze. "The purchasing entity is a limited liability company called Northside Ventures," I said, "and the registered agent for Northside Ventures is a man named Peter Pike." Tessa's head snapped up. "Peter? Your brother." "He was selling the land to his brother," I said to the room, "at $600,000. I pulled out a second document, a market appraisal I had ordered hours ago from a rush service. "The current market value of a waterfront lot at Harlow Point, zoned for multifamily use, is $1.2 million, I said. The silence in the room was absolute. "You weren't just selling it to pay the debt," I said. "You were selling it at half price to your brother, so he could flip it for the real value, and you two could split the remaining $600,000. You were going to strip the equity from my family twice." "That is speculative," Graham stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "The market is volatile. I was securing a guaranteed offer." "You were securing a heist," Cal Morrison said. Cal was sitting in the corner chair, arms crossed over his chest. I had insisted he stay for the signing. He was the bolt that locked the door. Graham whirled on him. "You shouldn't even be here. You are a contractor." "I am the guy you called 5 times last night," Cal said, his voice rough and deep. "I checked my call logs. Buddy, you called me at 10 o'clock. You called me at 11. You left a voicemail at midnight saying, and I quote, 'Just get the machines on site. I will double the deposit if you start before sunrise.'" Cal stood up and walked to the table. He placed his phone down. "You told me the buyer was getting cold feet," Cal said. "You said, 'If that house isn't gone by Monday morning, the deal dies and I am dead.' You didn't say the family loses money. You said you were dead." Graham looked at the phone as if it were a loaded gun. "It was a figure of speech." Graham whispered. "No," I said. "It was the truth." I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing right next to him. "You were never trying to save the house for Dad," I said quietly. And you weren't even trying to save it for me. You were laundering a family asset to cover your gambling debts and line your own pockets before the house of cards collapsed. I had to, Graham screamed. He slammed his hands on the table, the veneer of the civilized lawyer finally shattering completely. He stood up, his face twisted and red, veins bulging in his neck. If I don't pay Sterling Bridge by Monday, they execute the judgment, Graham shouted, his voice echoing off the glass walls. They will take my partnership. They will humiliate me if you don't sign that authorization. Evelyn, I am ruined. I am finished. He looked around the room, wild-eyed. Don't you get it? He yelled. I need that sale. I need that money. You have millions. You don't need it. Why are you doing this to me? The echo of his shout faded, leaving a ringing silence. He had admitted it, finally, completely, and loudly. It wasn't about the family. It wasn't about memories. It was about him needing our money to fix his failure. Tessa let out a sound that broke my heart. It was a low, keening wail. She slumped forward, putting her head on the table, her shoulders shaking violently. Tess, Graham said, snapping out of his rage, realizing what he had just done. He reached for her shoulder. Honey, I didn't mean. Tessa stood up. She pushed her chair back so hard it fell over. She looked at Graham, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with a horror that went deeper than anger. You weren't renovating, she whispered. You told me we were fixing the porch for Dad. You told me we were making it safe for the kids. Graham pleaded. I was going to make it right eventually. You were going to bulldoze it, Tessa said, her voice trembling. You were going to destroy the place where we grew up, and you were using me. You made me yell at my sister. You made me attack Evie just so you could rob us. She backed away from him. You didn't do this for the family. Tessa choked out. You use the family as human shields. Tessa, please, Graham said, taking a step toward her. Don't come near me, she said. It wasn't a scream. It was a flat, dead statement. I am going to my parents' house. Do not follow me. She walked past him, past me, and out the door. She didn't look back. Graham watched her go. He looked at my father. Ray, Graham said, you know me. You know I love her. My father stood up. He looked at the man he had treated like a son for 15 years. He looked at the suit, the tie, the desperate, sweating face. I thought I knew you, Dad said. His voice was hoarse. I thought you were the success story. I thought you were the protector. Dad walked over to the table and picked up the fake email printout, the one where Graham had signed Evelyn Murphy. You forged my daughter's name, Dad said. You stole from my medical fund, but that is just money. Money can be replaced. Dad dropped the paper back onto the table. It fluttered down like a leaf. But tonight, Dad said, you stood here and told my daughter that her property, her hard work only mattered if it could save your reputation. You looked at us and saw resources, not people. Dad leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than any shout. You turned my retirement party into a crime scene, Graham, and you turned my home into a bank vault you tried to crack. Dad turned to me. Finish it, Evelyn. He took my mother's arm, and together, they walked out of the room, following Tessa. Now, it was just me, Graham, the lawyer, and the contractor. Graham sank back into his chair. He looked small. The fight had drained out of him with the people he was trying to perform for. He was alone with the law now. The deal stands, I said, sitting back down. But the price just went up. Graham looked at me dully. What? I am adding a clause, I said. You will resign from the board of the country club. You will resign from your position as executor of any family trust associated with the Kellers. And you will sign a document acknowledging that any contact with the property at Harlow Point constitutes criminal trespass. You are stripping me of everything, Graham whispered. I am stripping you of the illusions you used to hide. I said, you kept your license. You kept your freedom. That is more than you deserve. I tapped the paper in front of him. Sign the confession, Graham. Sign the debt assumption, or I pick up this phone and call the district attorney, and you can explain to him why you were selling $1 million property to your brother for half price." Graham picked up the pen. His hand shook, but he didn't argue. He knew the walls had closed in. The evidence was too perfect. The witness Cal was sitting right there. The paper trail was absolute. He signed. He signed the confession. He signed the promissory note. He signed away 10 years of his financial freedom to pay back the sister-in-law he had tried to rob. James Thorne took the papers, checked the signatures, and notarized them on the spot with his own seal. "It is done," James said. "The debt is purchased. The lien is transferred. Mr. Pike, you have 30 days to make your first payment to Blue Hollow Holdings." Graham stood up. He looked like a man who had survived a car crash, but hadn't yet realized he was bleeding. He looked at me one last time. "She will never forgive you," Graham said. "Tessa, she will never forgive you for destroying her marriage." "I didn't destroy your marriage, Graham," I said calmly. "I just turned on the lights. You were the one holding the sledgehammer." He turned and walked out. He moved like an old man. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. It was over. The house was safe. The money was secured. The predator was collared. "Good work," James said, closing his file. "Yeah," Cal said, standing up and stretching. "That was intense. You handled him like a pro, Ms. Murphy." "Thank you. Cal," I said, "send your invoice to my assistant. Full price." I stood up and walked out of the office. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. The air outside was crisp and cold, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the conference room. It was evening now. The sun had set, leaving streaks of purple and bruised orange across the sky. My parents and Tessa were waiting by Dad's car. They weren't speaking. They were just standing there, huddled together against the chill. When they saw me, they straightened up. There was no applause. There was no dramatic reconciliation. Real life doesn't work that way. There was just the awkward, heavy silence of a family that had been broken and reset into a new, unfamiliar shape. Tessa looked at me. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked exhausted. "Is it done?" she asked. "It is done," I said. "He signed. He won't bother you about the house again, and the debt is contained." Tessa nodded. She didn't say thank you. She couldn't, not yet. I had saved her financial future, but I had shattered her present. That was a debt that would take time to process. "We are going home," Dad said. He opened the car door. "Are you coming?" "Evelyn." I looked at them. For years, I had wanted to be part of that circle. I had wanted to be the insider. "No," I said. "I have a flight in the morning. I have a meeting in Chicago on Monday." Mom looked at me, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "You are leaving." "I have a company to run," I said. I walked over to them. I didn't hug them. I stood in front of them, firmly, claiming my space. "The house at Harlow Point will be locked up tomorrow," I said. "I am hiring a new contractor to do the actual repairs, the roof, the foundation, the things that actually need fixing. No demolition." "Thank you," Mom whispered. "But hear me clearly," I said. Looking from Mom to Dad to Tessa, that house is not a family commons. It is not a fallback asset. And it is not a prop for your social standing. The wind whipped my hair across my face, but I didn't brush it away. "It is my property," I said. "I bought it. I saved it. I own it. From today on, anyone who wants to call it the family home needs to start by respecting the landlord." I turned and walked toward my rental car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them watching me. I knew they were. And for the first time in my life, they weren't looking at the invisible daughter. They were looking at Evelyn Murphy. And they finally knew exactly who I was. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let me know your location and what you thought of Graham's downfall. Don't forget to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel. Like this video. And hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who love a good serving of justice.